Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to the Caribbean.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it should be fun.
It was warm.
We're going to look at some reports and articles all about Jamaica.
Oh.
You know, a country that's, well, historically had economic troubles, but
Right.
now it's getting all this, like, global praise for how well their economy is doing.
Yeah, I've seen some of those headlines.
It's kind of a head scratcher, right? Like, is this a true, like, miracle turnaround?
Yeah.
Or just some really good PR?
It's pretty dramatic when you see just how much things have changed.
Yeah, it's a huge shift.
You go from reading about their struggles to now
Yeah.
all this talk of construction and wages going up. And
Yeah, even the Miami Herald was talking about Jamaica's hard-won economic stability.
interesting.
But, I mean, beyond just those, like, snapshots,
Yeah.
what's really going on? What's driving this change?
Well, the sources keep mentioning all this praise they're getting.
Oh, really? From who?
Like some really big institutions.
Yeah.
For example, back in 2019, the World Bank,
Okay.
they ranked Jamaica as the 6th easiest place to do business.
6th. In the entire world.
Globally. Yeah.
Huh. That's,
To put it in perspective, that's like
yeah.
easier than doing business in a lot of developed countries.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
And Forbes, the same year, named Jamaica the best Caribbean nation for business.
Okay, so that's two big names right there.
Yeah.
Saying Jamaica's the place to be.
Right.
But it's not just rankings, though, right? I feel like I've also seen
But you're right.
some pretty high-level people paying attention to Jamaica.
Yeah, like Ajay Banga.
The World Bank president.
Yeah. He actually made a trip to Jamaica.
Really?
And it was a historic trip.
How so?
It was the first time ever that a World Bank president has visited the island.
Oh, wow. So they're definitely sending a message.
Yeah, and during his visit, Bonga, he specifically mentioned how well Jamaica's been managing,
Yeah.
the economy, what they call macroeconomic management.
Macroeconomic management. Okay, so like...
It's like the big picture strategy
Okay.
to make sure the country's economy stays stable and growing.
Gotcha. So big picture stuff.
Right.
Okay, so the World Bank's impressed.
Yeah.
But what about the IMF? Weren't they, like, kind of skeptical of all this?
Well, even the IMF, and they're known for being, pretty tough in their assessments.
Right, yeah.
Even they've had good things to say.
No kidding. What did they like?
They were particularly impressed with how Jamaica handled, some of those global shocks.
Like the pandemic.
Exactly, COVID
Yeah.
and other things like that.
Yeah.
They called it a nimble and prudent policy response.
Okay, so basically saying Jamaica adapted well
Yeah, that they made some smart moves and were flexible.
to deal with the crisis.
Exactly.
All right, so we've got the World Bank and the IMF practically giving Jamaica a gold star here.
Yeah.
But are these just words, or do the numbers actually back it up?
Oh, the numbers are definitely a big part of this story.
Okay, lay it on me.
So one of the key indicators that they often look at
Yeah.
is what they call the debt to GDP ratio.
Debt to GDP. All right, break that down for me.
Basically, it's like a way to measure how much debt a country has
Okay.
compared to the size of its economy.
Gotcha. So, like, how much they owe versus how much they're making. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And back in 2012, Jamaica's debt to GDP ratio was over 140%.
Oof. That's pretty high, right?
Yeah, it was a really heavy burden.
Okay.
But then, fast forward to 2023,
Yeah.
and it's dropped to 78%.
Wow. Okay, that is a huge drop.
It's the lowest it's been since the 1990s.
So that's like, what, over 20 years?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, but I mean, this didn't just happen magically, right? Like, what steps did they take to get their finances in such good shape?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's where we start to see how all these pieces of the puzzle kind of fit together.
Okay.
One of the key strategies was what economists call fiscal discipline.
Fiscal discipline.
Basically, it means the government made some tough choices,
Like what?
to tighten their belt, cut spending,
Okay.
find ways to increase revenue.
So basically, like, a diet for a government.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay.
But when you say cut spending, does that mean like
Yeah.
social programs took a hit? Did regular Jamaicans feel this?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because these kinds of measures can be difficult in the short term, for sure.
Right.
But for Jamaica, it seems like it was seen as a necessary step.
To get things back on track.
Exactly.
But still, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Did this diet actually work?
Right.
Did reducing the debt actually improve the lives of people?
Yeah.
Or was it just, fixing the books while people struggled?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
And that's what we'll dive into next.
All right, let's do it. So we've seen all these accolades, the debt's way down, but like, did this fiscal discipline thing,
Yeah.
did it actually help the average Jamaican? Well, this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
We always hear about how, like,
Right.
debt reduction comes at the cost of social programs.
Right. Yeah. Got to cut back somewhere.
But the Jamaica story, it seems to be different.
Different how?
They actually saw a decline in poverty.
Wait, so as they tightened their belt,
Uh-huh.
less people were living in poverty.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
That doesn't seem to make sense.
Right.
How does that happen?
So the World Bank, they estimated that the poverty rate in Jamaica
Okay.
fell from 23% in 2020 to 12.6% in 2022.
Wow. Okay. That's
Big.
Yeah, that's huge.
And that puts it close to their record low of 9.9%.
Which was when?
Back in 2007.
So less debt and less poverty.
Yeah.
It sounds like they figured something out that most countries haven't.
I wouldn't say they've cracked the code or anything.
Okay.
But they've definitely made some impressive progress.
Yeah, for sure. And you said this all happened despite some major global challenges.
Right, like we were talking about before, the pandemic.
Right.
So to get back to your question about how it's possible,
Uh,
we got to look beyond just the debt stuff.
okay.
There were other policies happening too.
So what else were they doing?
Well, there's this thing economists call structural reforms.
Structural reforms. Okay, so like
Think of it like changing the systems and rules that kind of run the economy.
okay, so like foundational stuff.
Yeah, and in Jamaica's case,
Uh-huh.
they focused on making it easier to do business,
Okay, so like
attracting investment, fostering competition.
less red tape, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Did they like cut taxes?
Who did. They streamlined regulations, simplified tax procedures,
Okay.
made it easier to get credit.
So that basically made Jamaica more appealing to investors.
Yeah, both local and foreign.
Which makes sense because remember that World Bank ranking,
Uh-huh.
6th easiest place to do business globally.
Right, it's all connected.
Okay, so it sounds like a pretty broad approach.
Yeah. But I'm wondering, all these reforms,
Yeah.
this focus on business and investment,
Yeah.
did it just benefit the wealthy?
That's a good question.
Or did everyday people actually see the effects?
Well, the sources say these reforms did a good job creating jobs.
Okay, so more jobs.
Yeah.
But were they good jobs? Like, were wages going up too?
Yeah, there's evidence that wages were rising.
Okay, so people were actually earning more?
Yeah, and part of this is attributed to the booming tourism sector.
Right, tourism. That makes sense.
It's a big part of their strategy.
But what were they doing differently?
Well, it wasn't just about the beaches and the music.
What?
They actually invested in, like, upgrading the infrastructure.
Like what?
Airports, roads, hotels, that kind of thing.
So they made it easier and more appealing for people to visit.
Exactly. And they also wanted to offer more than just, sun and sand.
Okay, so what else?
They were pushing cultural tourism, ecotourism, that kind of stuff.
So they made Jamaica a more well-rounded destination. Yeah, they wanted to stand out, be more competitive.
Did it work? Like, did all these tourists actually bring in more jobs and income for Jamaicans?
It seems so.
Okay.
The sources say tourism has rebounded really well.
Even after COVID?
Yeah, even after that setback.
Wow.
It's a big driver for their economic recovery now,
Creating jobs and income.
especially in hospitality and services.
Right. So we're seeing a few things here.
Yeah.
Fiscal discipline to, manage the debt,
Uh-huh.
these structural reforms to get businesses going,
Right.
and then focusing on tourism.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine it was all smooth sailing.
Oh, you're definitely right.
Like, there had to be some bumps in the road, right?
Yeah, I mean, no major economic shift happens without challenges.
Right.
There were definitely difficulties,
Like what?
especially when they were implementing those austerity measures.
Right. The cutting spending and stuff. That's never popular.
Oh, it's tough.
So how did the Jamaican government manage to push through those policies?
Well, one key factor seems to have been communication.
Oh.
They were very transparent
About what?
about why these measures were necessary.
Okay.
They explained the long-term benefits, the need for everyone to kind of share the burden.
Right. So they brought the public along
Yeah, and they also focused on social safety nets.
so that people weren't just left out in the cold.
Exactly. They wanted to protect the most vulnerable.
So it was a balancing act.
Yeah.
Tough choices, but also protecting people.
Yeah. And bringing everyone along for the ride.
Right. And it's important to remember this
Yeah.
wasn't just about numbers.
It's about people.
Right.
It took leadership, political will, and a belief in Jamaica and its people.
Right. The numbers tell one story, but there's always the human story behind them. So with all these changes, all this progress,
Yeah.
what's it actually like on the ground in Jamaica?
Yeah, good question.
Like, how are people experiencing this?
That's something we should look into more.
Yeah, we've talked about the big picture stuff. But let's see if all this positive stuff is actually making a difference in people's lives.
Let's do it.
All right, so we've covered all the impressive numbers and all the changes they made, and we've seen how much praise Jamaica's been getting.
It's been quite a story.
But at the end of the day, what really matters is whether regular Jamaicans are actually feeling this, economic upswing.
Right. A rising tide doesn't always lift all boats.
Exactly. So we need to see if this progress is actually leading to a better quality of life for people.
Definitely.
So are we seeing any signs of that?
There are some encouraging things.
Like what?
Well, we've already talked about how much poverty has decreased, which is a huge sign that living standards are getting better.
Right. But
And beyond just the numbers,
yeah.
the reports talk about some real changes.
Oh, okay. Like what?
New construction projects, which are creating jobs, wages are going up, and there's a sense of optimism.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, it's one thing to see positive statistics,
Right.
but it's another to hear about people actually feeling the difference.
Exactly. So are there any specific examples of how this is playing out?
The tourism sector is a great example.
Okay.
As tourism has grown,
Yeah.
it's had a ripple effect throughout the whole economy.
How so?
More tourists means more jobs in hotels, restaurants, transportation, all those related industries.
Right. So that means more income for families.
Exactly. More opportunities for small businesses. It's a boost for local communities.
It sounds like a thriving tourism industry can really lift up everything else.
Definitely.
But what about the people who aren't directly involved in tourism? Have they benefited too?
It seems like it.
Have they?
Those structural reforms, remember.
The ones that made it easier to do business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They seem to have played a role too.
So by creating a more business-friendly environment, it opened up more opportunities.
Yeah, for entrepreneurs, small businesses, people looking for work outside of tourism.
Okay, so they weren't just relying on one industry.
Right. It's about creating a diverse economy.
Where people have more choices.
Exactly. And with unemployment so low.
Right. You mentioned record lows.
More Jamaicans are earning a steady income, which
Yeah.
gives them financial security for their families.
So it sounds like this positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
Economic growth leads to more jobs.
Which leads to even more growth. Exactly.
But is this sustainable?
That's the question, isn't it?
Are there any, potential downsides or challenges ahead?
Well, of course, no economic story is perfect.
Right.
There are still issues to address.
Okay, like what?
Youth unemployment is still a concern.
So even though overall unemployment is low?
Yeah, it's still high for young people.
Okay, so what can they do about that?
It shows they need to keep investing in education and job training programs, especially ones that help young people.
So it's not just about creating any jobs.
Right. The jobs need to be a good fit for the people.
Right. Okay, are there any other challenges on the horizon?
Well, one thing that's always a potential concern is the global economy.
Okay.
Jamaica, like a lot of island nations,
Yeah.
is vulnerable to changes in global markets.
So if something happens in the world,
It can have a big impact on them.
so they need to stay adaptable.
Exactly. They need to be ready to adjust.
So it sounds like a cautious optimism kind of thing.
Yeah.
They've made amazing progress, but they still need to be careful
And they need to keep making smart choices
to make sure this continues.
and that it benefits all Jamaicans.
Right, so going back to the beginning,
Yeah.
miracle turnaround or clever PR?
I think it's more nuanced than either of those.
Okay.
This transformation is a result of, strategic decisions, tough reforms.
And the resilience of the Jamaican people.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that economic progress isn't just about numbers and policies.
It's about people.
Yeah, it's about their lives, their hopes, and their ability to create a better future.
All said.
And it's a story that gives hope to other countries facing similar problems,
It shows that positive change is possible.
even when things seem really tough. So that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Jamaica's economic transformation.
It's been a fascinating journey
Yeah, a story of resilience and hope.
and a lot of hard work.
Exactly. And we hope you've enjoyed listening to it.
We encourage you to keep learning about these issues.
Yeah, there are so many amazing stories happening around the world.
And we'll be back soon with another deep dive.
So until then, thanks for listening.